He joined one of the fastest teams in Formula One, and that decision quietly ended his career. Heikki Kovalainen arrived at McLaren not as a superstar, but as an ideal teammate, obedient, reliable, and fast enough to support a title bid. But he was never meant to be the leading man. Not because he crashed, not because he lacked speed, but because since the moment he signed, the team had already chosen who mattered, and it wasn't him. This is how Lewis Hamilton, without ever intending to sabotage him, erased his teammate from Formula One. At the end of 2007, McLaren was in crisis. The previous season had exploded into an internal war between Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, two teammates locked in a very public feud that split the garage. Publicly, Ron Dennis promised they were resetting everything. Clean slate, equal machinery, a new era. So they signed Heikki Kovalainen, a rising star, calm, no ego. A driver who had just outscored Giancarlo Fisichella in his rookie season at Renault, 30 points to 21. Renault insiders genuinely believed he could become their next leader after Alonso, but McLaren didn't sign him to lead. They signed him to obey. The media reported it as a partnership of equals. Inside the factory, it wasn't. From day one, Hamilton was the project. Kovalainen was the insurance policy. He just didn't know it yet. Kovalainen was no pay driver. He rose through Renault's ladder. 2004 World Series by Nissan champion. 2005
Kovalainen, who has been chasing him,
GP2 runner-up with 5 wins, and graduated from Renault's driver development program to their F1 test role, then race seat. Senior Renault figures publicly praised his rate of learning and technical feel. Calm under pressure, methodical, data-led.
There's a lot of rumors about Heikki going to Williams. What do you say to that? Any truth?
We're not working with the rumor. We're working with reality.
So he will drive for your team for the rest of the season?
Exactly the profile a factory team should be able to weaponize. So when McLaren called, it felt like destiny. A championship-winning car, a championship-winning team, a teammate he believed he could match. What he didn't realize is that McLaren did not want another potential superstar. They wanted silence. The season opener in Australia should have been his warning. Hamilton won from pole. Kovalainen finished 5th.
Head of Heikki Kovalainen, who can't believe his bad luck after all that hard work.
A late error cost him a podium when he accidentally hit the pit lane speed limiter after repassing Alonso on the penultimate lap.
Alonso comes back at him, but Kovalainen's got problems. He didn't get drive out of the corner, and now Alonso...
handing the place back. One tiny mistake, and the podium slipped. And it wouldn't be the last time. Even when he was fast, something always seemed to pull the result away. Malaysia brought a reset. He finished 3rd.
Kovalainen was 3rd, but nearly 40 seconds behind the winner.
His first podium for McLaren. Then, in Barcelona, he was running strongly when a sudden left front wheel failure at turn 9 sent him straight into the barriers.
Has gone off into the tyre barrier there. It is Heikki Kovalainen. Was lying in 3rd place.
The problem they have there with that conveyor belt that goes in front of the tyres.
He later said he couldn't even remember the impact, just that the points vanished with it. By mid-season, he had just 1 podium to his name, while Hamilton was already leading key metrics. More poles, more laps led, more points on the board. Kovalainen began publicly saying he was building momentum, and McLaren kept insisting both drivers were being treated equally. Yet most Saturdays, Hamilton was still a few tenths quicker in qualifying. And in Formula One, that tiny gap is enough to decide who gets priority when it matters. On August 3rd, 2008, Kovalainen finally took his first and only F1 win. From the outside, it looked like a breakthrough, but context matters. Felipe Massa's Ferrari blew its engine with 3 laps to go while leading comfortably. Kovalainen inherited P1 and brought it home. A victory on the sheet, not on raw pace. He has since acknowledged as much. For a moment, it felt like things were turning, but the season kept swinging back and forth in ways he had no control over.
Kovalainen has had a very cautious start, and it looks like Hamilton's being very...
Then came Monza. He finished P2, just behind Sebastian Vettel, who took a surprise maiden win for Toro Rosso, his 2nd podium of the year. Proof that the speed was real, even if the season itself still wouldn't let him take charge. But one race would make the truth impossible to ignore. The moment where everything clicked for him, and not in a good way. Monaco, 2008. Hamilton started P3. Kovalainen was forced to start from the pit lane after a technical issue before the race. McLaren immediately split their strategy. Hamilton was placed on the aggressive race-winning plan, while Kovalainen was put on a longer defensive stint. During the race, when Hamilton clipped the barrier and picked up a puncture, every call on the McLaren pit wall shifted entirely toward protecting his race.
There, Kovalainen just tagging the front wing.
Kovalainen's race was effectively used to feed data and cover scenarios, not to attack. No drama on the radio, no arguments, just the clearest signal yet. Hamilton was the priority.
And Lewis Lewis Hamilton wins the Monaco Grand Prix!
That was the moment Kovalainen understood. McLaren didn't need to say it. Every decision on the pit wall made it clear who the team was built around. He wasn't there to fight for the win. He was there to protect it. This wasn't new at McLaren. In the late 90s, Mika Häkkinen was openly prioritized over David Coulthard. In the early 2000s, Kimi Räikkönen got developmental advantage over Montoya. Now, in 2008, the pattern simply reset. Hamilton was the new corporate weapon. McLaren does not run democracy. They never have. They run around one identity at a time. Kovalainen was never going to be it. By the end of 2008, he had the podiums, the speed, and even a race win, but none of the leverage. The message was clear. The door to being a true title contender was already closed before the next season had even begun. 2009 changed everything. The biggest aerodynamic regulation shift in years. It was supposed to level the playing field. Instead, it did the exact opposite. The McLaren MP424 was a disaster at launch. Hamilton struggled early, but quickly adapted to the unstable, unpredictable rear end and began dragging the car back into contention. 2 wins, podiums, relentless adaptation. Kovalainen, he did not adapt. Not because he lacked talent, but because the car no longer operated in the range his driving style could optimize. When your car is built for oversteer rotation and you are wired for mechanical stability, your teammate stops being a rival and becomes an alien. Hamilton looked like a force of nature. Kovalainen looked like a passenger. During the season, there was no announcement, no explosive argument, just distance. Kovalainen's race strategy meetings got shorter. His updates arrived later. The car was shaped more aggressively around Hamilton's style every month. By the time 2009 ended, McLaren didn't renew his contract. Official reason? Reset. Opportunity. Moving forward. The real reason? They no longer needed a passive number 2. They wanted one who could score podiums and still follow orders. Enter Jenson Button, world champion, marketable. McLaren pitched 2010 as an equal, all-British pairing, and even reshuffled race engineers for Hamilton and Button to level the slate.
Good to see you again. You're wearing a Lotus shirt this time. Just tell us about how you got involved with the team.
Well, the first contact from Mike Gascoigne actually came very early on, already during the season, but at that moment, I didn't really want to talk to anybody. I just wanted to finish the season, as strong as I could and do the maximum for the team.
In 2010, he joined Lotus, a brand new team. 0 points scored the entire season. He went from fighting Ferrari to fighting Virgin and HRT just to avoid last place. But here's the most brutal part. He actually drove brilliantly there. Qualified that car far above its natural position. Outperformed every teammate. Showed consistency that only the midfield teams were actually paying attention to. But Formula One does not reward effort. It rewards positioning, and perception is permanent. By 2012, the world had already made up its mind. The narrative was written. Good enough to exist, not good enough to matter. He didn't retire. He just left the circus. In 2015, he moved to Super GT in Japan, a completely different racing world from Formula One. It wasn't instant glory, but within a year, he adapted and rose to the top. In 2016, he became the GT500 champion. Precision driving, consistency, clutch under pressure. The driver he always was, when not politically outgunned. So, did Hamilton destroy him? Not intentionally. There was no sabotage. No politics from Hamilton personally. No betrayal. But that's the thing. Hamilton didn't need to do anything. All he had to do was be faster, and the system erased the slower man. Hamilton was the chosen weapon. He was explosive and marketable. Every element McLaren could sell to the world. The moment he proved he was faster, McLaren's machine did the rest. Heikki Kovalainen lost not in racing, but in relevance. And that's the most brutal way to end a Formula One career. Not with a crash, not with scandal, but with silence. Lewis Hamilton would go on to become a 7-time world champion, a global icon, a name that will live forever. Heikki Kovalainen, a warning. A reminder that in Formula One, driving for the best team can sometimes be the worst decision you ever make.